Christian parenting.
Welcome to the Christian Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Steph Thurling. I'm the Executive Director of Christian Parenting, a mom of 3, and I am so glad that you're here. This is a place where you can bring your real self, no matter what that looks like today, and be given the space, resources, and encouragement you need to set aside perfection and grow into the perfectly imperfect parent God made you to be. If we want our kids to develop a lasting faith, we need to be teaching them about Jesus in the home. Parents are so important in raising kids to know, love, and follow Jesus, but it is really hard to know where to start. There's a lot of amazing content out there, so Christian Parenting did all of the sorting and filtering for you and put together a resource to help you navigate it all. Discipleship Simplified is a digital guide that includes some of the best articles, podcasts, and videos on topics like faith at home, reading the Bible, theology, prayer, church and worship, and character. You'll also find conversation guides and discussion starters, and even scripts to use with your kids. So if you've ever wondered, what do I say when my kid doesn't want to go to church? Discipleship Simplified has a script for that. Or if you want to know how to weave scripture and conversations about faith into your everyday life, Discipleship Simplified has ideas for that too. Since this guide is digital, you can download it straight to your phone or computer and search through resources whenever you need it. I know that this guide will be helpful every time you have a question about discipling your kids. You can go to cpgive.org to download your copy for just $5. That's the best of the best resources from top Christian parenting contributors for just $5. Again, that's cpgive.org. We all have big what-if questions. They're just a little different depending on our experiences, our wiring, and our situations. I always wonder, what if I mess my kids up? What if I'm doing everything wrong? And what if something horrible happens? And the truth is, our kids have questions like this too. And my guest today, Katy Boatman, is here to walk us through that. Katy is a writer and a marketer, but her favorite role is being an aunt to her nieces and nephews. Katy has spent 15 years mentoring kids through student ministry, and she is passionate about helping them understand who God is and reminding them that they are not alone. Katy's devotional, You Can Trust, addresses many of the questions that boys have, from what if my team loses, to what if God changes his mind about me, to what if I don't know how to pray. And the answers always point back to God's enduring faithfulness. Today, Katy and I are talking about preteen boys and the what if questions they wrestle with, the need kids have for stability and truth as they grow up and ask these questions, how girls and boys learn and respond to God differently, and the need for devotionals and other resources for preteen boys. I know both boy moms and girl moms will get a lot out of this episode, so enjoy. Hey, Katy, how are you today?
I'm great, Steph. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I am so good. I'm really excited that you're here, so thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. I am looking forward to this.
I know you're on a family vacation too, so you're taking time out of your busy day to be with us, so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. Happy to do it.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about your family because that's what we do to start this episode. Can you tell us who you're with on this vacation? Tell us about your family, and then you have that one word or phrase to describe them.
Sure. Yes, I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, so my parents are still located there. And I have 2 older brothers. One lives in Atlanta with his family, and the other lives in Nashville, Tennessee with his family. And that's where I also live. So we are all on vacation. We're missing one brother. He and his family couldn't make it, but the rest of us went on a little fall break vacation. And we were a family that really grew up in the church, around the church. I really came to know the Lord at a young age. And as I got into high school and college, I started to realize that I had a passion for just turning around and helping the generation behind me. So a passion for student ministry, which really carried into my college years. I became a young life leader in college, and I honestly thought that that's what I would dive into as far as a career goes. And it's funny, right after I graduated college, I moved up to Nashville, and I started looking for anything and everything when it came to jobs, especially jobs at a church. And for whatever reason, the church jobs that I looked at, the doors just weren't opening. So I ended up starting at a job in Christian publishing, in book publishing. And while I kind of grew in that career, I also was serving with churches and being a small group leader and still being heavily involved in student ministry. And so it's been this kind of interesting path of figuring out, using writing and publishing skills while also diving into student ministry at the same time, just in my free time. So that's always been a passion of mine. And it's fun to have family close in Nashville, to have my brother and sister-in-law and niece and nephew there. It just really makes it feel like home to me. I love being an aunt. And I would say one word to describe our family, I think it's resilient. We've kind of walked through some different season of hardship because of, different things that have come up over the years. And I've watched my family navigate that in resilient ways. And it's really been our faith that has carried us through, and just a relationship with the Lord and counseling and all the things. But now, kind of looking back, being past those hard seasons, when I look at that, I'm like, wow, we really have come to a place of healing. And it's been a lot of resiliency that has just been at the forefront of all of it.
Yeah. God is so good and faithful. I think a lot of people are probably going to resonate with what you just shared, and the reminder that your faith carried you through it. So thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I'm really excited for you to answer my next question, because I kind of told you this before we started recording, but I think that as someone who works so closely with students for so many years, you kind of have a different perspective, because students talk to their mentors or youth workers or volunteers differently than their parents. And so I'm really excited about what we have to share. Can you tell us what is one thing that you want every parent to know?
Yes. I think what has stood out to me over all the years of student ministry and just walking alongside parents in my own life, like friends who have kids and my brother and sister-in-law, the thing that I've noticed the most that I would say is your undivided attention and presence truly does make a difference. Just the other night here on our vacation, I threw out a question at dinner and I was like, what was everybody's highlight of the day? And I kind of thought that my niece would say, oh, it was getting down to the beach for the first time this year or whatever. But she said it was throwing the football with my dad and brother. And that really kind of stood out to me because, we're in a fun, exciting new place for the week. And yet it was just getting time with her dad and her brother just to throw the football for like 10 minutes. And then the next night, like we were having a movie night that I had helped the kids pick which movie we were going to watch. And about 10 or 15 minutes into the movie, I found myself playing on my phone, scrolling through it. And my nephew was like, you're not paying attention. And he just called me out. And I was like, you know what? He's right. Like I was the one that initiated movie night and helped pick out the movie. And then I was over there playing on my phone. So they pay attention and they notice. And I think that undivided attention really goes a lot farther than we think it does.
Yeah. And that's so simple too. I mean, it's simple in the fact that going to throw a football around doesn't take a lot. Like you can do it on vacation or you can do it at home. It's hard because we all do that. We all pick a movie. And then like my husband and I will spend forever trying to decide what movie we're going to watch. And then we end up sitting there like looking at our phones half the movie anyway.
I know. I know. It's such a bad habit. And it's one of those things where we talk about, not wanting kids and teenagers to have that habit, but we're the ones modeling it. And so I felt called out in that moment and he was right.
Yeah, that's convicting. That's good. Okay. So besides, I feel like we do talk about technology with kids all the time. Like when you talk with parents or you talk with students, like what are you hearing students talk about right now? Like what are they asking or like processing through? What's going on in the student world?
That's a great question. I think I honestly see a lot of students just asking some of the bigger questions that we as adults are asking of like, why is everything, so chaotic and crazy all the time? But I think the difference with adult versus a student is that a student needs to know that there's like a steadiness, that there's an adult and that there's a God who will be steady and who is not worried. Whereas we as adults, I think, are trying to figure out step A, B, and C that's to come. Like how do we keep things in order when this world is so chaotic and so heartbreaking? And that's what has always just drawn me to that student ministry relationship, was even having adults in my life when I was a teenager that really were there just to talk. Even if I wasn't asking for an answer to something, just to be a listening ear that I could vent to. And that's really where I've seen students open up the most, when they know, like, hey, I just kind of want to share what's going on, and I don't need you to fix it in this moment. I just want somebody to listen. And oftentimes they're opening up and not even realizing that they're doing it, right? It's like we went to go get our nails done, and now she's opening up because we're doing something fun. It's not like we sat down and sat across the table and said, okay, now we have to have a serious conversation about everything on your mind. So, yeah. And of course, there's so many factors at play and so many things that kids are having to deal with that we didn't have to growing up. My niece and nephew have grown up in Nashville their whole lives, and I've watched them have to live through obviously a global pandemic, but also Nashville had a tornado. There was a bombing on Christmas Day. There was a school shooting last year at their sister school, or not last year, that was this year. And so the things that they've had to experience are unfathomable. And I'm like, of course they're anxious kids. So they just need a reminder that, like, we are going to be okay, even though things are really hard and really crazy. Like, we're going to be okay.
I am so grateful for people like you who are willing to pour into kids in that way, because it's so important. So a partnership between parents and church and people who are willing to invest in them is just so critical. So thank you for being willing to do it. And I assume kind of some of your experience with the students you work with or your niece and nephews, like that was kind of inspiration for writing devotionals for kids, right? Like you have one for girls, I know, but today we're going to talk about the boys. So, and I know you did some research with your nephew, right? For writing a devotional on boys. So what did you hear them talking about? Like, I have preteen boys. Tell me all about it. How'd you decide what to focus on when you're talking to boys?
Sure. Well, I do have to tell a little bit of the girl devotional story in order to get to the boy one. So I set out to write just a short devotional for my niece's 10th birthday. She had mentioned that she really loves to have something to read at night, and I thought it would just be a fun gift. And she really was needing something to kind of calm her mind at night. So I called it You Can Rest. And I wrote about, all the things that girls worry about. And after it came out, that was March of 2021, the number one question I got was, well, where's one of these for boys? And so at first, I really was like, I don't know if I'm the right person to write that. The girl one was obviously a lot easier because I lived it and I could kind of pull my niece and her friends together. But the more I talked to friends and mentors and even other men in my life, everyone was like, no, you could do this. Just get the help of men and boys in your life. So I pulled together my nephew Blake and his group of friends, and I called them my board of bros. And we sat down one day with a bunch of snacks and like fidget toys, and I asked them what they worry about. And it's, it was everything from worrying about things at school, like either something scary happening at school, or grades, or losing a game. Obviously a lot of the boys are really into sports, and so that gets hard. Or if something's not fair in a game, that's always top of mind. So what I found is it kind of was everything from like very small things like, your grades, to very big things like, what if somebody breaks into my house? Mm-hmm. And the more I thought about it and kind of talked to them, I realized how much curiosity that boys have, which is great. And we encourage curiosity, but also their what if questions sometimes are rooted in fear or worry or anxiety. And so that's how I came up with the idea of You Can Trust, which is 100 devotions to answer your what ifs. So I phrased every day of the devotional as a different what if question. And they really were based off of things that the boys said. So I just made this, giant spreadsheet of their questions and then built upon that and talked to other men in my life too and said, what did you worry about when you were a preteen boy? And just started going off of that. And then also looking at scripture and, what does God have to say about this? What is the promise that we have when we don't know what's true? And it has been so eye-opening to kind of see these boys start reading the book and really take an interest in it, which I think is great because even, some boys I know are not big readers. My nephew's not a big reader. He would admit that. But I think to just have it in a format where it's just really short questions and a quick answer is just hopefully a helpful resource that they can go to for years to come. I know those questions aren't necessarily going to go away.
Yeah. I love that you have a variety in there too, because I think that's so relatable for the boys. Like, for example, you said, what if my team loses? I had seen that one. I'm like, yeah, that's like a very real fear for my boys. Like, what if we lose? Like, what does that even mean for me?
Right.
What does that mean for my team? But then there's questions in there like, what if God gives up on me?
Mm-hmm.
And what if I don't know how to pray? Like, those are two very different things, obviously. One seemingly more superficial and one like big spiritual question, but they're both really valid. And they're both really important to boys. So it's good to honor that and just like meet them where they are.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I wanted to also meet them in places about, talking about strength and just because I think there's so much that we talk about, like men have to be so strong and you can't show emotion and all of that. And I really wanted to include some of that too, of just like, yeah, you can be strong, but your strength ultimately comes from God. And it is okay to show emotion. It is okay to cry. And make sure that they understand that that's the way that God made them,
Yeah, that's good. As a working mom, 2 of my goals for the new year are to take better care of myself and simplify. And one of the ways I'm doing that is with HelloFresh. There's a reason HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. They make it so simple. All I have to do is pick my meals and my delivery date, and all of the pre-portioned ingredients and step-by-step instructions come right to my door. That means less hassle, less wasted food, and they have health-forward options like over 30 calorie-smart and protein-smart recipes each week. The recipe cards are easy to follow and they're full of pictures, so it makes cooking with my kids really fun too. And we all know that when they are involved in the cooking, they're more likely to eat it, so everyone wins. We have a great deal for you right now because I know that mornings can be crazy as a parent. I often find myself forgetting breakfast or grabbing something really fast. But you can go to hellofresh.com/CPPodcastFree and use the code CPPodcastFree for free breakfast for life. That's one breakfast item per box while the subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life at hellofresh.com/CPPodcastFree with the code CPPodcastFree. Why did you decide on what ifs? Because every little devotional is a what if question. So tell us a little about the format, how each page is laid out. Let's start there.
So there's 100 different devotions, and yes, every day is a different what if question. And for a little while, I debated on do I put these in sections where it's like the first 10 are about school and the next 10 are about sports and the next 10 are about grades. But when I thought about it, I was like, that's not the way our brains work. And that's not the way their brains work. Every day, I'm sure there's something else different popping up. So I really just kind of sorted them randomly. And then in the very back, I put an index with topics so that if they get to a place where they're like, I don't want to read day 1 to 100 straight through, but today I am worried about taking a test, then they can go look and, see what page is that on and find that. And then every 10 days, there's an activity day. It's just a little something for them to do that can help them apply what they're learning, but in a, physical activity kind of way. When I wrote the girl version, when I wrote You Can Rest, every 10 days, there was a journaling prompt. And I think that fits a lot of girls, but for the boys, I felt like they needed to do something a little bit more active and fun. So that's what that's about.
I like that you did that and that you are so intentional to write for boys. because boys and girls are made different.
They
just
are
made different. And they are going to respond different. They're going to learn about God different. Like, I love that you did that. That's really creative and smart.
Thank you. Yeah. I wanted to make sure that there really was something that was crafted for them specifically, because a lot of parents had asked when You Can Rest came out if it was for boys too. And I would always say, they can read it, like probably 75% of that book they could apply to them. But there's also a lot that's very specific to girls. So
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't want them to have a missing resource. That was kind of the inspiration again for You Can Trust. I wanted to make sure that it was really tailored to boys. And, what I've learned that I didn't know going into this is that there really are fewer resources for boys of that age. And I hate that. So if I can help fix in a small way, I'm happy to do that.
Why do you think that is?
That is a great question. I think maybe part of it is that boys are stereotypically known to be less readers, or they read less. And part of it too is that I think a lot of authors set out to just write for that age group as a blanket whole and not think the girls, read and learn this way and the boys read and learn this way. And I understand time is limited, but I also think it helps a ton to think specifically about the way their brains work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Okay. So your whole book is based off of what ifs. And I feel like I love that because preteen boys are asking what if, right? And I still I'm asking what ifs all the time. Like, I get stuck in a few. Like, I get stuck in, what if I mess my kids up? What if I fail at my job? And like, what if I'm actually doing it all wrong? Like, what if I just have it all wrong? Like, I just get stuck in those and more. What are your what ifs that you get stuck in?
Yeah. I think the ones I get stuck in is, what if the work I'm doing doesn't really matter? Like, I can get really caught up in, and I don't even mean like as a whole, like writing. I just mean like when I show up to my 9-to-5 job, and you're doing the assignments and turning it in, I can get caught up sometimes in like, does this matter? Will it matter? And like, the truth of it is that it does, right? That we've all been gifted uniquely and that God has put this work before us. So that's one. Two, I am 36 and not married yet. So I often, my mind often goes to, well, what if I never get married? Like, it is a desire of my heart, but it's not anything God ever promised me. So I've been learning how to navigate this life of living faithfully and obediently to what God's called me to, while also desiring marriage. So very often I think, what if I don't get married? What does that look like? And then third, I think on a practical day-to-day level, my mind can go to worst case scenarios sometime and think about, like, what if something happens to my people? So, whether that's thinking about my parents or thinking about my closest friends, because my closest friends in Nashville truly have become my family. And I think oftentimes, I can go to the kind of worst case of like, what if something happens here? Those are big ones for me.
Yes, yes, that one too for me. I'm really good at the what if something happens at 3 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah. Why is it always 3? Yeah.
I feel like it's 3 or 4 for people. And it's just like, you wake up and then you're like, what if all these terrible things potentially happen?
I know.
Yeah. I think everyone probably, not everyone. Hopefully you're not relating to that. I'm happy for you if you're not.
Right.
I think I did want to ask you that though, because I think it's just so important to point out that, like, as adults, we have these big what ifs, right? And we have an opportunity to help our boys at a younger age, like, work through the what ifs and learn that, we may still have them forever. We may always worry about, what if I mess up my kids, or what if something happens? But we always know the truth on the other side of that, right? So when you have a boy reading this devotional and finishing it up, like, what do you want them to know? What's your hope for someone who reads this book?
Yeah, my biggest hope would be that the takeaway is that God is always with them, because I think so much of our fear and worry and anxiety is rooted in this feeling that we're alone and that it's all up to us. And so when we remember that God truly is walking with us when you're going to school, for adults when we're going to work, when you're playing that football game or whatever it might be, that is the with us part that changes everything. And so that would be the number one thing that I hope that they remember when they walk away, is that they're not alone in it, that God's right there with them.
Sometimes I wonder too, if it's harder for boys to kind of come to that conclusion than it is for girls. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I think maybe girls think about loneliness more of a friendship sort of way. But boys, I feel like there's this idea of like, I can do it all on my own and I'm strong. Kind of like you said earlier, like I have to be strong. I have to do it. So what do you think are some things that we can do for our boys to help them come to that conclusion that they're not alone and that they don't have to do everything in their own strength?
Right. I think in those moments where we kind of see that lie popping up in their little brains, just reminding them that the way God made them is to rely on Him, that they weren't built to do all of this on their own and be so strong all the time, and that it's getting to turn to God as that helper and that resource and a father and a savior, that they actually are stronger because of Him. And so it's not just, a total reliance on themselves. So I think, it's like when we start to see them melting down a little bit over those things, trying to remind them that that's who God is. It's a learning of His character. And even as an adult, I have to daily remind myself of who He is. I often go back to Psalm 23. I know it's such a, repeated chapter, but it's one that sticks out in my head. But the CSB version of the first verse of Psalm 23 says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I have what I need." And that's one of the things that I say often to myself. The Lord is my shepherd, I have what I need. And so it's also this like reminder again, like I don't have to rely on myself, but because of who He is, I have what I need. And I think that's something just we have to keep teaching the kids too.
Yeah. I mean, His promises are good. And
yes,
He's faithful all the time, even when it doesn't look like how we want it to look. Right. I mean, sometimes I think we hear those words that I just said and it's like, His promises are good, so everything's going to work out the way that I want it to. And that's not what He promises, but He does promise that it will be good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's faithful and He's never failed. And I think that's something that's still hard to wrap my head around, that He just doesn't fail. And He may, in our own minds, we might be like, well, you didn't answer the way I thought you were going to answer in the way I wanted you to, but you're right. His way is always better. And I have seen it over and over again in my life, that even when it doesn't go the way I thought I wanted it to, His way is always better.
Yeah. What a gift to be able to teach our kids that at a younger age so that they can really internalize it, as they get older. I think that's just I'm really grateful that you wrote this book. I have 2 boys, and I think people ask me all the time for devotionals. Like I get messages all the time, like variety of ages. And a lot of it's boys, because I feel like they're just, like you said, there aren't a ton of resources. I'm not really sure why, but I really appreciate this one. It's laid out really well. There's good activities, real questions that boys actually relate to. And it's just, like I said, variety. So I really want people to be able to find it, and your girl version too. So remind us of the girl version and then the boy version too. I'll link everything, but tell us where we can find copies and then how we can connect with you too.
Yes. The girl version is called You Can Rest. And then the boy version is called You Can Trust. And you can find both of them wherever you love to buy books. I know Amazon is typically the easiest and fastest way, but you also can find it at a local bookstore. And a lot of times if they don't carry it, they'll be happy to if you ask. So that's where you can find them. And I just consider it an honor that I had the opportunity to write them. And they really came out of just personal relationship with my niece and nephew and the other kids that I've worked with. And so I'm grateful to get to put them out in the world. And I'm glad to hear that they've been helpful so far.
And then how can we connect with you? Where can people find you?
Yes, you can find me at katyboatman.com. I'm Katy. It's a unique spelling, but katyboatman.com, or I hang out the most on Instagram. So it's at Katy Boat.
I'll link all that stuff for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on today. I appreciate your time, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your vacation.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed this. Thank you, Steph.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that you have a wonderful week. Check out show notes to get a copy of You Can Trust and You Can Rest for your kids today. May God bless you. May you be filled with His peace, knowing that you can trust Him for all of your questions, big and small. He cares for every detail of your life, and nothing is too big or small for Him. Thank you so much for listening to the Christian Parenting Podcast. If you haven't subscribed, you can do that now, and that way you won't miss an episode. You can connect with us on Instagram at ChristianParenting_org and see more resources at ChristianParenting.org. And if you're a mom raising daughters, we have the perfect course for you. Visit cpguides.org to learn more about our Helping Moms Raise Confident Daughters online courses. And lastly, if you have enjoyed this podcast or other Christian parenting resources, please consider donating to this ministry. Visit ChristianParenting.org and click the donate button. Christian Parenting is 100% donor funded, and none of this would be possible without your help. We are so grateful for you. You're amazing. God bless you.